Do forgive me, I'm going to be reading off of a script because this is a very long video. Cult films, something audiences have been the masterminds behind. But why are the audiences the masterminds? And what even are cult films? No, the term cult film does not mean a movie or documentary about cults. Something I've had to explain a lot lately, so let me break it down for you. Cult films are one of the only film genres that aren't defined by a connection of stylistic choices in visuals and plot, but rather worshipped by its audiences to the point of cult status. And therefore, that makes it a cult film. Aubrey Miller states in her article on how women-led cult classics generate committed fandoms that, generally speaking, cult classics tend to be films that aren't incredibly well received upon their release, but are enjoyed ironically or have simply gained a significant audience following despite their lack of box office success. These films tend to have a variety of interchangeable factors that make them so widely adored. Some are very low budget and some are campy.
With anticipation.
Some are what we would consider independent, and all of them are quotable. But what ultimately makes them cult films is their adoring and devoted followers. I mean, these people are obsessed, hence they are like a cult. And this is why I say that audiences are who are creating these cult films. See, if it weren't for the huge following that these films cultivate, then they might have been forgotten and lost to the millions of movies that have been made since moving pictures from a camera came to be. But today I'm focusing on a special string of the vast web of cult films. Girly cult films. Yes, I said girly. Women and people of color are key audiences that simply cannot be ignored by Hollywood, said Ana Cristina Ramon, co-founder of The Report and director of UCLA's Entertainment and Media Research Initiative. I'm going to focus on 3 specific films in this video, but let me preface with the fact that all 3 of these films follow young, white women as their leads. I truly hope that the next female-driven cult classics we see in the near future are those that follow women of all colors, of all walks of life, and of all ages, because we all deserve some zany chaos for entertainment, and we all should get to see ourselves in these characters. And I believe there are certainly some possible films that have come out in the last few years that could rise to cult status that are female-driven, zany, and star women of color. And don't get me wrong, there certainly are cult films that feature and star people of color and people of all ages. In terms of people of color, some examples would be The Wiz, Night of the Living Dead, and you can find a lot more listed on the Collider article, 11 Best Women Directed Cult Classics to Stream on the Criterion channel, which I will link down below. Back to the 3 films that I'm discussing today. First, I'll be discussing Legally Blonde. The 2001 rom-com is not for everyone. Just scoring a 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb, it went from an $18 million budget to accumulating a worldwide intake of $141,778,188. Whew! That story follows a Miss L. Woods, a vegetarian Gemini, and it follows her journey for love. What starts out with a breakup and determination to follow the man she loves to Harvard ends with her pursuing a successful law degree and meeting a man who actually values her. But something this story, I think a lot of people, especially women, can connect to is that she starts out smart, stylish, fun, and experiences the world trying to dim her shine. The cultural "I'm not like other girls" phenomenon is one that most women experience and or witness. Why like pink? It's so girly. Girly is weak. Well, not to Elle Woods. She sees the world as dulling her down, but knows she can be an intelligent woman and still be her damn self. As Geneva Flarin notes in a short essay titled Legally Blonde is a feminist classic Let me explain. On the Penn State Presidential Leadership Academy website, can one wear pink lipstick and still fight the patriarchy? Elle Woods tells us you can wear a hot pink suit and 4-inch stilettos and still crush it in the courtroom. That you can get a gorgeous manicure and have a brilliant mind. Most of all, she teaches us that smarts and sincerity will forever be more important than labels. The story is also based off of a novel by the same title, and in Business Insider's article, 19 Things You Probably Didn't Know About Legally Blonde, it states, it was written by Amanda Brown and was inspired by her real-life experiences at Stanford Law School. So the story has a true connection to our reality, which makes it all the more powerful as it touches on serious topics like harassment in the workplace. Long before the hashtag #MeToo movement became a cultural movement, in Elise Hernke's article on its 20-year anniversary reflecting on why Legally Blonde is still universally loved, posted to medium.com, Hernke states, instead of merely using this moment as a plot device, it feels like there is sincerity in the writing, which allows the film to feel ahead of its time in its way. And the film was before its time, something we see in many cult classics, such as the 1968 cult classic Night of the Living Dead, which was praised for starring a black man.
Well, is it coming? Come on! Get in!
The film allowed him to exist rather than trying to applaud itself for featuring a black man or use him as a narrative device to touch on divisiveness. In the article Boss Up Here, The Revolutionary Legacy of Night of the Living Dead's Ben on blackhorrormovies.com, it states, it's hard to overestimate the importance of Ben's role in normalizing black leads in Hollywood movies. Granted, that remains a work in progress. I was unable to find the author for this particular article, but you can find the link to the article itself down below if you'd like to check it out. As I was saying, this was incredibly unusual for its time, and it all came down to the director of the film, George A. Romero, expressing that Dwayne Jones, the actor who plays Ben, was just the best actor who showed up to the auditions. He was made for that part. So cult films really stick with us as an audience when we see it take on something new that hasn't been done before. Or if it has, it's in a way that hasn't worked well enough previously for us to accept, and now they're doing it in a way we can accept. Legally Blonde took on a tough and ignored topic, and it felt natural in its interpretation without hindering the character's ability to move forward and succeed. Legally Blonde went on to make a sequel, and another movie we won't talk about. Elle Woods still garners popularity online, with numerous articles stating it is still going strong with audiences over 20 years later. Suffice to say, the woman is on a lot of minds. Elle Woods was who carried this film. I mean, obviously, she's the main character. But had you put any other character in her place, a woman not as girly, not as giddy, not as positive, you would not have the Legally Blonde that we all know and love. Legally Blonde developed into a musical and debuted on Broadway in February of 2007. It litters every high school theater department, including mine, and continues to be cherished for quotes such as,
"You got into Harvard Law?"
What, like it's hard?
The second film is Mean Girls, a 2004 high school comedy drama. With a $17 million budget, it amassed $130,191,763. Oh, these numbers are hard to say. Scoring a 7.1 on IMDb, it has the hearts of its fans as being on Collider's top 10 most quotable movies of the 21st century. That's crazy. Featuring quotes such as,
"That is so fetch. Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen."
The film follows a awkward Katie Heron who moves from Africa to the United States, jumping from homeschool to public schools in a new country is culture shock enough, but when the most popular girls in school allow her into their clique, she develops a plan with a newfound friend to make their perfect, super shiny lives crappy. Katie eventually finds herself deep diving into fitting in a little too deep. And she starts to lose herself, her real friends, her studious endeavors, and her family bonds. Parker Kirby states in their article, Film, Mean Girls 20 Years On, Why Are We Still So Obsessed? on magazine.com that the film was inspired by Rosalind Wiseman's Queen Bees and Wannabes, as well as screenwriter teen phase one experiences in high school, similarly to how Legally Blonde was transformed from a novel to the big screen. Coming from true experiences, it's obvious a lot of people of any gender can relate to this story. Trying to fit into school and making friends is not easy, and most of us don't succeed in being known by everyone in school. But in reality, who really wants that? Who wants a bunch of superficial connections rather than having a few deep, meaningful ones? By the end, she learns her lesson, of course, but man, is the journey fun to watch. In a Glamour interview by Stephanie McNeil with Jennifer Kinchin Armstrong, the author of So Fetch, which explores the long-lived popularity of Mean Girls, Armstrong states that films like Mean Girls and 13 Going on 30 allowed their heroines to be a little more flawed. And they're about romance, but it isn't just about romance. Once again, a film that was taking on a unique narrative and showcasing ahead of its time values that stuck with audiences. When a young girl is at the center of a story, she doesn't need to be perfect. We crave imperfect characters because we ourselves are not perfect. And therefore we yearn for stories where we as the audience can not only connect, but self-reflect on ourselves. Mean Girls' popularity also rose to such popularity that it was developed into a Broadway musical in 2017. And it has a sequel that we don't talk about. And recently the musical was turned into a movie, which was not well received. The fans really, they take Mean Girls very seriously. There were some issues with the marketing for that movie too, let's be real. The final film we are discussing today is Heathers, which had a $3 million budget and only got that. Yeah, it's barely a third, yikes. This 1988 dark comedy follows Veronica Sawyer as her high school life descends into madness after accidentally killing one of her friends, Heather. With a toxic love life, toxic friends, and everything is just toxic. She finds herself surrounded by obsessive teens who are willing to destroy others to get what they want. Friendship and love can be a tricky battlefield, and sometimes we get too close to people who really aren't good for us, and were just never right for us in the first place. It's a human mistake, one that is so well illustrated through this zany, campy, gory film. Earlier I mentioned Mean Girls and how it took on a unique narrative that highlights the flaws in its main characters who are teen girls. But Heathers came out 16 years before and did just the same thing. Daniel Bettridge wrote How Heathers Changed Teen Movies Forever, which you can read on theweek.com. In this article, Bettridge states, Hughes laid the foundations of the modern teen film using crude categories to explicate the highly coded world of cafeteria tribalism and hierarchies. But Heathers was the first movie to show modern teenagers as they really were. Dark, cynical, and often cruel. Ahead of its time, huh? Yeah. But as we can tell by the box office numbers, Heathers didn't even see a crumb of the success that Mean Girls did. Heathers was too ahead of its time and just wasn't loved in its time. A common pattern we see amongst many cult films is a lack of popularity on its release. Oftentimes cult films do become popular long after their release. For example, Rocky Horror Picture Show. In Alyssa Miller's article, What Makes the Rocky Horror Picture Show a Cult Classic on NoFilmSchool.com, Miller writes about how Rocky Horror Picture Show was not well received at first. It wasn't able to draw in new audiences, but rather had the same people going to see it over and over again. Miller states, as a way to salvage the film, a young advertising executive for the studio managed to talk to Bill Quigley, who happened to work for the company that owned the Waverly Theater. The Waverly was and is still a well-known art house theater that specializes in midnight showings, and the young executive thought that Rocky Horror could do well in that setting. Little did anyone know the Rocky Horror Picture Show became the midnight movie to watch. Rocky Horror Picture Show is now an adored classic, and it still has showings in movie theaters to this day, as well as performances. Heathers followed in its footsteps in a way, going from poor box office numbers to becoming so loved that it was made into a Broadway musical. Are we seeing a theme here? In 2010, it debuted in New York and has a popular soundtrack that skyrocketed the film back into popularity for today's generation. The story has dark comedy, which I personally am all here for.
Fuck me gently with the chainsaw. Do I look like Mother Teresa?
And going from such poor box office numbers to being a popular musical in the 21st century, talk about a comeback. So, some common themes that we're seeing here in these films is they all contain comedy in their genre. You could easily argue they're all directed towards female audiences. They are all quotable and all had semi-small budgets. And they've all held their audiences close and continued to garner love. Oh, and they're all just really fun to watch. I definitely recommend all of them. I believe female-driven plots really can succeed in Hollywood when given the chance. I mean, look at all the films I just discussed. Each had a human error and lesson. Each had memorable costumes. And each had memorable characters. Of course, we still will have to wait a while because one cannot determine culthood of a film for sure until it's still years down the line and been worshipped by its audiences for a fair amount of time to judge, maybe a decade or more. But I think we will soon see a resurgence of films that are coming out now and in the last 5 years or so make a comeback, just like Heather's did.